Hi there, friends. Welcome to the Eat, Pray, Run podcast. I'm your host, Dorina Gilmore-Young, and I'm here in the office slash studio with my hubby, Shawn. We are excited about season 4 of our podcast and inviting you into some interesting conversations about food, faith, and fitness. And if you've listened to our podcast before, I'm thrilled to have you back at the table. If you're new around here, I want to just say welcome.
You can count on the same refreshing interviews and encouraging reflections. We are passionate about our faith and sharing it with our listeners. In every episode, you can expect a thoughtful story, an engaging interview, and a little prayer.
As we continue with season 4 today, join us for the adventure chasing God's glory as we eat, pray, and run. We're hosting these conversations with athletes, artists, chefs, coaches, and authors about the intersection of food, culture, travel, running, and of course, faith.
Welcome to season 4, episode 5.
We're here for it, and we hope you are too. Friends, in every episode of Eat, Pray, Run, I like to share a little reflection that points you back to God's glory. And today I'm going to be reading a short article that I wrote for Propel Women. Join me as I read on trusting God with your dreams. I've dreamed of publishing children's books since I was in the first grade when my teacher, Mrs. Kaczynski, wrote words of encouragement in red pen on my first creative story. She wrote phrases like, "so creative" and "how romantic" in the margins of my unicorn romance adventure. That encouragement planted a seed of hope in my heart that I could one day be an author. Of course, my first grade aspirations did not include steps for taking my stories to publication. I had no idea how long that process might take. In college, I pursued a degree in English literature and journalism. I worked as the editor of the student newspaper because it was a sensible thing to do with my writing skills. In that season, I grew an appreciation for the art of interviewing and telling stories. And eventually, that landed me a job as a features reporter for a daily newspaper in Central California. While reporting was a day job I loved, I still held fast to my little girl dream to publish children's books. I would write stories in the cracks of time and attend workshops. I sent stories off to dozens of agents and editors, but didn't receive any bites. After several years, I got a call from an editor who said she found the manuscript I sent and wanted to publish it. When I checked my records, I discovered I sent the story to this particular editor 2 years earlier. She said they moved offices and just found it in a closet. The following year, my book, Cora Cook's Pansit, was published and won several awards. I thought I was on my way to a career in children's book publishing. I had half a dozen other stories in the works, including a sequel to that very first picture book. In a series of events, my first publishing company was bought by another publisher. I sent manuscripts to other editors, but received rejection letter after rejection letter. Some editors encouraged me that the stories were good, but not the right fit for them. I worked with an agent for 2 years, but she couldn't land any contracts for me either. Month after month, I attended meetings with my writing group. My friends signed multiple contracts, and I genuinely celebrated with them. The disappointment deep in my heart stung. In the quiet, I questioned why God would give me inspiration for these children's stories and then let them sit in a file. This past January, 11 years after my first picture book was published, I received a message from a children's book editor through Instagram. She said she was interested in talking to me about writing more books. My heart leaped. Was this the meeting I had been waiting for all those years? My agent and I met with the editor and discovered she was interested in so many of the themes and types of stories I had been writing for years. She valued the stories I valued. I didn't have to convince her to embrace my ideas. She was already on board. Eventually, she invited me to meet with the editorial board. I tried to hold back the tears as they praised my writing and creativity. They offered me a 2-book contract with interest in some of my other book ideas as well. Sometimes you wait for something for so long, it feels surreal when it finally arrives. I have the privilege of looking back and tracing all the ways God was working underground all the while. He needed time to get this specific editor in place during this particular time in history when more people are seeking out multicultural children's books. And while I was waiting and working on other projects, she was gaining experience as a teacher in the classroom. I am deeply grateful for the wisdom she was gaining in that space. Friend, maybe you're waiting for a spouse or a child. Maybe you're still longing for that dream job or to get into that college of your choice. Waiting can be so hard. And when waiting extends beyond months and years, it can feel downright demoralizing. I started to wonder if God even remembered I was still waiting. I doubted if writing books for kids was really part of my calling at all. I wondered if I should bury that dream and look for a new one. One passage that anchored me in the long years of waiting is in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path." The key word for me here is trust. Will I trust him with my dreams? Will I trust him with my future? Will I trust his sovereignty when the waiting gets long and those around me seem to be receiving answers to their prayers? It's scary to surrender our understanding of a situation, but I am confident that he knows better than I do. And when this proverb says, he will make your path straight, it's a reminder that what feels like the long way may be the straight path to that place he wants us, all in his timing. If you'd like to check out the full version of this article on trusting God with your dreams, you can hop over to propelwomen.org. Thanks for listening today, friends. Friends, I'm so excited to be here with my hubby, Shawn, and with Dave Connis, who is actually an ex-librarian living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with his wife and 3 kids. He has 2 sons and 1 daughter, and he says a dog that barks at non-existent threats. I'm sure a few of you who are listening could probably relate to that one. When he's not writing children's books, he's interpreting software developer speak as a senior UX writer at OutSystems. Dave is also a member of the Jedi Counsel, facilities manager at the Sanctum Sanctorum. I love it. And has a propensity to daydream whenever he attempts to be an adult. So if that bio hasn't made you curious, welcome, Dave, to the Eat, Pray, Run podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yes, and it is for sure true that when I try to be an adult, I always end up daydreaming about something, some plot line or story thing.
Well, based on that intro, I am definitely excited to hear more from Dave. So, Dave, why don't you start us off by telling our audience a little bit about yourself, like where you live, anything you'd like to share about your family, and also your day job.
Yeah, so I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Kind of. I'm actually 8 minutes outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, but nobody knows where Rossville, Georgia is. So I say Chattanooga, Tennessee. So, and then I'm married. We've been married for, I need to make sure I get this right, 11 years now. And I have 3 kids, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So
wow,
very tiny, very small, and they often feel like 18,000 children.
We can't relate to that at all.
Yeah, I'm sure you can't. And then I do work full time. As I said in the bio, I work for one of the most generically named companies ever. Like I always make the joke, like when people in movies like have to give like a generically named company, it's always like data structures or like data something or something systems. So I work for a company called OutSystems. It is a real company, not just like a random name that I came up with. I basically do product design, but I focus on the words within a product. So
love it. Thanks. Well, you and I connected because we have some mutual friends, and we also are both children's authors, and we have the same book publisher. So I love that connection. And I got to review Dave's new book that came out. I wonder if you could just start us off talking about the stories of God and Kiki and where this book idea came from. I'm going to show people our cover here. So beautiful.
Yes. So this is the second book in a series. So far, there's two. The first one was the Inventions of God and Eva. And then this one is obviously the stories of God and Kiki. And the idea for both kind of came out of, there was like two things. One was I read 1,000 picture books at night because I have 1,000 children. So it's like one picture book per child.
Right. Perfect.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Logical sense. And as I was reading, I was just like, man, where are the like whimsical picture books that also talk about Jesus?
Yes.
And I wasn't seeing any, and maybe I was just looking in the wrong places. But so that was number one. Number two was I really wanted to explore this idea of doing stuff that is like being made in the image of God, but specifically around creativity. So like writing and painting pictures and drawing things and inventing things, because that's something obviously that's really close to my heart as a writer. So both of those things kind of converged into this book, Stories of God and Kiki. And it was a wonderful experience writing it. So that's kind of where it came from.
Well, I love this book, and I really love the marriage of the creativity in the story, in the words, which is obviously your part, and then the illustrations that Amy Domingo came up with. They're just so colorful. For our listeners who are on YouTube, I'm going to actually show the book here. For those of you who are listening as a podcast, so sorry, you're going to have to go look up the book yourself.
Google, you've got it. You can do it.
Yes, go Google, go Amazon, or your bookseller of choice. But I love Kiki, and I love just the colors that she brought out and the motion. And so I'm wondering, what was that experience like in just, having this illustrator, Amy, bring to life the story that was in your head that was obviously creative?
Amy and I worked together really well. And I wasn't sure why for a while. And because my assumption is I operate on the bare line assumption that there's going to be some conflict. And because if I'm operating on that assumption, then I'm ready for it, and then I can have a lot more grace for it, and I'm not surprised. But like me and Amy, we were talking the same language, and the story of how we ended up working together is a little funny too. But it's because I realized that we both do the same thing for a full-time job. So but I didn't know that. So like she randomly said, oh yeah, I'm like a UX designer. I was like, oh, that's why we work together so well. We have the same vocabulary. So that's the first thing. It was really funny. And working with her was just so easy because she's really good at symbolism, like putting symbols and putting deep thought into like the illustrations. One of my favorite things is illustrations that are engaging and not just kind of like flat backgrounds, but like things that you can slow down and be like, oh, what is this? Or, oh, where was this character before? We saw that one before. And like being able to slow down and point out those details. And she is amazing at that. Like that is like one thing that she's really good. There's just like so much biblical reference in all of her illustrations. And that really shown in this one. And that wasn't necessarily like, none of those things were like, there were things that I hoped for and things that I tried to like make notes about. And then there are things that she just like knocked out of the park. Every single time I've worked with her, I'm always like, yes, that is exactly what I was thinking. Good job.
I think it's really fun to hear about that relationship with authors and illustrators and kind of how those things play out. And a lot of people don't realize usually that author is not choosing the illustrator. It's something, especially if you're working with a publishing house, where the publisher chooses. And I'm so grateful that Waterbrook Multnomah, who we're working with, do allow the authors to have some input and have some connection with the illustrators. That's not always the case. I know with my first children's book, Cora Cook's Pond Seat, I didn't know the illustrator at all. I never got to talk to her. And I never saw any of the illustrations until I was holding the book in my hands.
Such a different process.
Yeah, totally different process. Now that was like 12 years ago. So I think some things have changed in the industry. And then I also think like Christian marketing and Waterbrook are unique in what they do. But, I think kind of my experience when I've talked with kids and, been speaking in different places, that people kind of assume, oh, you pick this illustrator because they're your friend in real life, or, like some artist that you know. And so it's really special that you and Amy had that connection, like you're saying, you had some common language, and even her being able to bring alive some of that symbolism. And
Yeah.
I love that about this book. I want to linger on the pages because there's so many different like little elements in the background where it's like, okay, I'm listening to the words, but I'm also like, what is that? Oh, look at this little, vignette that's over here. And she really invites kids into the story that way.
So we actually kind of cheated. It's like, this is I won't try and go too long on this story, but I actually found her on Instagram scrolling, one day, and I found her and I kind of approached her with this idea, and I was like, look, at the time I didn't have a picture book agent. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, it's a funny picture book about Jesus. Like, who wants those? Nobody wants those. Like, I don't think that's a thing. So like, we can try it. I love your stuff. I just don't know if this is going to go anywhere. So, I mean, obviously it did, but the way that it worked was it was just like a very God thing, because like, you normally don't get to pick, and you normally don't get, except like, I mean, from what I've heard, it's not normal that you pick yours and then you make it all the way to a publishing deal with that same one, that same illustrator. So like, the way that it happened was just like, it just happened. It was for sure a God thing, because there was a bunch of times where I was like, this isn't going to work.
I'm glad you shared that story though, because again, it kind of highlights how every journey is unique.
Yep.
And that connection with authors and illustrators is different for all of us.
I've loved being able to have that connection with her. And I know that like, eventually we're going to work on different books, and I'm going to constantly be comparing. I'm pretty sure be comparing the experience with the one with her, because it's just been so good.
Would you be willing to read a few pages of the book aloud to give our listeners just a sense of your voice?
This is Kiki. This is God. Sort of. He's hard to draw. Kiki knows this. She's tried. God and Kiki are a lot alike, because God made Kiki to be just like him. Kiki and the slightly forgetful but immensely honorable Prince Tybee, the otter prince of Scallywag, are a lot alike. Kiki made Prince Tybee to be just like her. God and Kiki both love to write stories. He wrote the creation of the world and the Garden of Eden. She wrote Prince Tybee's quest for the all-knowing sea cucumber. He wrote Queen Esther saves her family and friends. She wrote Prince Tybee unsnaggles the snagglehorn. He wrote Jesus and the tomb that couldn't hold him. And she wrote Prince Tybee escapes the sleepy sea. Okay, how's that?
Thank you so much. Oh, it's so fun. And for those who are listening on the podcast, let me just point you to our YouTube channel if you have kiddos, because it's so fun to see Dave actually read this and, be able to hear the humor. Right. And Shawn and I laughing in the background.
It definitely makes it much more enjoyable.
Yes, exactly. So fun. Well, one of the concepts that you talk about through this book is this idea of the joy of salvation, which is actually like a pretty weighty idea. Mm-hmm. And I love that you're illuminating this for kids. So unpack this a little bit more, because I know it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah, it's kind of become a passion in the last 2 years, when I realized that I'm kind of a cynic by default. It's just like a part of my personality, is that I'm somewhat cynical. I had this realization while I was on a hike with my friends, and my friend was talking about something he was like super passionate about, was super into it. And I started like internally, I was like, oh, I'm going to make fun of him about this. And I was like, what? Wait, why? Why would I make fun of him about this? This is really cool. And then like that moment kind of led me into trying to figure out like, what about joy do I have this like disconnect with? Like, what about it makes me respond in these different ways? And that kind of led me through somewhat of a word study in the Bible about joy, somewhat of like a concept study, and I'm still kind of going through it. I've just been like coming to this idea that God gives gifts. Like there's so many, not to be confused with like gifts, but gifts.
Is it
I
gift?
wonder what God gifts would be. Like memes. What would those be? The Sons of Thunder, maybe. Like that God gives gifts. Man, that's really hard to say with the T. I've never noticed that before. And that they are everywhere throughout a day. And that those gifts aren't just like, they are the Bible, they are prayer, they are fellowship with the saints, they're like all of the things that we would consider gifts, but they're also just like Hawaiian pizza. And I will die on this hill. Hawaiian pizza is the best pizza. You can DM me. I will argue with you for days. We'll see who's more stubborn. But like good food is a gift, like any sort of good food. There's verses about like these sorts of things in Ecclesiastes and in Job, which are both semi-depressing books, but they're also like really good looks at like how do you find joy in reality. Right. And I think that those things mean a lot more than we let them, and actually like are involved with the joy of salvation and aren't separate from it. So that's why in Kiki there's like there's pizza. There's not just pizza, but there's like the New Jerusalem, because I mean the entire Jewish calendar is built around food. Like it's built around feasts and coming together and celebrating things. So I think that's just something I've thought about a lot, is like, what does it look like to not separate these gifts of God? This is what I think it's Ecclesiastes calls it that.
Yeah.
From the sacred, and making sure that those two things stay hand in hand, because it matters a lot. Like those things matter a lot if we let them and if we approach it with thankfulness. So yeah, that's the joy of salvation. It's my box for now.
Well, I love how that comes through in your books, and especially this one that we've been talking about. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that you're on that box, because it's also teaching kids, you know, that there's joy in that. It definitely resonates with some of the writing that I've done. And you know, we talked about food a little bit here. I definitely mentioned the all-you-can-eat pizza buffet, which is in your book. I'm a big fan of pizza. I grew up in Chicago.
That sounds wonderful.
My favorite is, so this is like New Jerusalem, and then there's this kid right here. I don't know if you can see that, but he's like about to go to town on some chicken nuggets. And it's just like, he's here for it. That is like one of my favorite parts of this entire book.
Honestly, this is my favorite spread. And I love just all the food. I love the color. I love that it feels like a big party. And on the serious side, part of my story is that my first husband went to heaven 8 years ago, and my kids were really little. They were 2, 5, and 8 when their dad went to heaven. And one of the things that we did a lot of times at the dinner table is we would imagine what heaven was like. And we would imagine and talk about, like, what do you think dad's eating today? Like, what do you think he's doing? And, you know, my kids were always like, you know, daddy's eating all the cream puffs that he can get, because that was his favorite food, but he was like very measured about how much he would eat here on earth. And so as soon as I saw that page, it just reminded me of that experience with my kids. And I love the playfulness of this. And even like I think it's a little boy like high-fiving Jesus, or maybe Jesus like passing him something, but it's like just the interaction there is so perfect.
I really resonate with that. My dad passed away unexpectedly in 2017. So sorts of exercises are something that I also often do with my mom, and we still often do that.
Yeah.
And like those are the sorts of things that like my dad loved talking about heaven. Like he just loved talking about it, and he would always like to go through like, well, what do you think this and this, and that makes it even sweeter. So I really resonate with that sort of exercise.
Let's talk a bit about running and fitness. I understand that you actually have got on a fitness running bug this year, or recently at least. So yes. Why do you believe fitness should be a lifestyle?
Ooh, what a question. Because I think humans are scared of long-term things, like just in general. I think it's like a lot easier to think about things in a short term. I mean, it is like to break things down into achievable chunks. And I think that has gotten, I know it's gotten me in trouble because it hasn't it's made me focus on a short-term goal that's actually a long-term lifestyle. Right. And I think for a lot of the times where I've like made the decision, like, okay, this year I'm going to get fit, I'm going to do this stuff, I'm going to run 80,000 times a day. The goal was never like, how do I sustain this lifestyle? It was, and how do I be healthy on a consistent basis? It was always like, I want to be able to run an 8-minute mile, or I want to be able to, there was like a very specific goal. And this year, I'm a dad of 3 tiny humans. I work full time, and I want to be conscious of my body and like its health. My dad died of a heart attack in 2017. It wasn't just because he wasn't conscious of that, but I don't think it helped. So like, I want to be mindful of like, I want to be around for my kids as long as I possibly can. So right. I wanted to take that seriously. And I think this year it's been a like, how do I do this? How do I make a lifestyle out of this so that I'm not just like showing up one day and like going super hard. And then like Halloween comes around, and then Thanksgiving comes around, and then Christmas comes around, and it's like, I've lost like everything that I did because I didn't have a plan. So yeah, anyway, I think that's been my impetus this year, is like, how can I achieve the goals that I want, but also how can I maintain these goals once I achieve them? And I think that takes a lot more time.
Speaking of time, I mean, is it correct that you're running about 5 to 6 times a week these days? And if so, like, when do you squeeze that in within your daily life?
So what I've been doing is I work out, I do strength training or weight training 3 days a week, and then I do cardio the other 3 days. So it's about 5 days a week. Okay. But I do it in the mornings, so really early. My family has always woken up really early. So that's just, despite my best attempts, the kids are up at 6 o'clock. And my wife and I have worked out a schedule. You go then, I go here, and I drop kids off, and you drop kids off, and just like all of the gymnastics of having children and trying to do things. But it's always pretty early, so I typically work out around 7:30 to about 8:30 in the morning, get home, do the home things. That's what I shoot for, but I also have to drop children off in between there, so it's always like wonky. But it's just been good. It also helps me burn energy that like I might otherwise be cynical. We were talking about cynical. I think working out really does help me focus my like, not necessarily my negative energy, but just like my frustrations or my anxieties. And I think that also helps. I think that's really healthy for me.
It's good to hear your kind of routine. And I mean, we have 3 kids too, so we understand, like you said, the gymnastics that you kind of have to go through with carting kids to practices in school and all of that stuff. But Shawn and I are both morning runners. I would say he is a natural early bird. I am a reluctant early bird. I'm more of that. I'm a night owl.
I love that classification. I feel it.
I think I've been waking up early for like 25 years to run, even though I'm a night owl. I can really resonate with what you said. You know, for me, when I take that time to run, it is helping me to focus my energy. I feel like it helps me as a writer. Like even when there's times when I'm like stuck on something, if I go for a run, there's something that happens that like it gets unstuck, or I get a little inspiration or a phrase or a word that helps. And then even, you know, running has been a place for me that's been kind of like therapy. It's where I pray the most. It's where I talk to God. It's where I grieve. And I'm so grateful for that, you know, there's a physical thing, but also there's like that emotional and spiritual thing that happens when we're running.
Yeah, that's really true. I've experienced that with writing. There's been a lot of times where I've been stuck on something, or like, oh, I need to figure this thing out. I don't know what's next or what to do. And I'll go for a run. I actually, because of how much it helps me when I take writer retreats, I try to take one once a quarter. When I take those, I like schedule in a run in the middle of the writing day, because I know it will be likely that I'm banging my head against something trying to figure out why it's not working. And I know in that retreat, as soon as I've like hit that moment, all right, it's time to go for a run. So here I go.
Lace up the shoes and head out the door.
I've ran for 10 years, but kind of like in and out. So it's always played that role in my writing life. I've actually at one point in time, I lived right across from a gym. And when I edited a book, a manuscript, I did it physically. So I'd go print it out, and then I would flip a bunch of pages on my clipboard, and I would go walk on a treadmill and edit with a red pen.
Nice.
Yes, I miss that. I don't get to do that anymore, but I called it walking and editing. I combined the words. It was wet editing.
Wet editing.
Yes.
I love that. I might need to try that. I'm in the middle of editing a manuscript right now.
You should try it. It was really helpful. Like, it helped me focus, and it also like got me moving instead of sitting in a chair. So yeah.
Yeah, that movement, I think, makes such a big difference. And I have a friend who's a therapist who I run, and she rides a bike next to me every Wednesday, but she's always like dropping this knowledge. And she talks about that idea of like how when we're moving our bodies, like we actually are helping things to get unstuck in our brains. So there's like real brain science that goes with this. Like it actually does happen.
So maybe I need to like trademark wet editing and turn it into some framework somehow.
We'll copyright that.
Yeah. I'll write a course. I'll write a Udemy course.
Okay, you should do that. You said it out loud now. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about parenting, since we have this in common, 3 kids each.
Yeah.
So many children.
So
that's like just 6 children between us. That's
that's more than a handful.
Yes.
So how do you experience God's glory as a father, and what is God teaching you in your parenting journey this season?
I really do think it's joy. Like, I think that's why I've been so focused on thinking about joy, is because I was just so bad at it. I'm not good at newborns. It's not like nobody told me in parenting that like you might have some ages that you're better at. You're more like your personality and the way that you engage and the way that you like do relationships, you're just better at a certain kind of age. And I think I just assumed that as soon as I had a newborn, it would be like, I've never known love before in this way. Like that, you know what I mean? The world tells you these things that you're supposed to like automatically love beyond the shadow of a doubt this new creature that is in your life. I didn't have that experience. My oldest came out and I was like, so you just demand stuff from me, and I'm like, and like I get nothing from this, and I'm exhausted, and like you keep coming back for more. And it didn't help that he was a really hard kid. So from there, I think I started off on the wrong foot and on the wrong understanding of just like how to do this thing and what the expectations were. And I think trying to bend my reality towards like, what does it look like to be joyful, even when I am like not sleeping at night and like exhausted all the time and feeling drained from just like the sheer physical demand of like 3 kids. Because right now, like I'm in the super physical stage where they're like, you wake up in the morning and it's like, hey, can I have this? Can I do this? Can we have this? And it's like 6 o'clock and you haven't had coffee. And you're just like, I just need to not make a decision. I just need to not decide things right now. And that has been a huge learning journey for me, to not be cynical about all of that, and to not be cynical about fatherhood, to not be cynical about kids. I am what I am. I think that's one of the biggest reasons I've been really trying to work on my joy, is because I don't want to be that. And I want to have joy for my kids and for myself, because I have the nights where like everybody's sleeping. And maybe y'all have these where like everybody's sleeping and you haven't been with them for a few hours. And then you like get in your head, like, they're like old now. For my 6-year-old, he's in 1st grade now. And like, if I like in less than 12 years, he's going to be gone now. Like I started off in 18 years and now I only have 12. What happened? Where is this going? And then I get really sad. And then you like just want to go hug them. I have those moments. So I know that I want to, even if I feel like there's not joy there, I want to engage them and enjoy them as much as I possibly can, because I know they're going to be gone at some point and he's not going to want to hang out with me as much. and like all of that stuff. So anyway, that was long-winded.
So good.
It's been a long journey, and there's still a lot of work to do, but I am still thankful. I'm working on thankfulness and joy. And I think that's the biggest thing that God's been teaching me.
Yeah, thanks for that encouragement. I think, we're in a little bit different season with our kids because they're 10, 13, and 16. And I definitely had that reality this year that you're describing. It's like our oldest is going to go away to college in 2 years. Like we're looking at colleges with her. And it's like, whoa, okay. How did that happen? She was born yesterday,
Yeah.
And
yes.
so it's a good checkpoint for us as parents. I love the way that you pushed into, the joy that you can find in the midst of that. And, it's real, like it's challenging, like wiping people's butts and like, bringing them to school, getting them to school on time with, their shoes tied. And then even the season that we're in where we've got teenage girls, those things can feel heavy, but also the privilege of that weight is really such a gift. Back to gifts.
Back to gifts. Yeah. And it is a gift. It is a gift. And I remind myself of that all the time, because I need to remind myself of that all the time. Otherwise I just get cranky.
Yeah.
Like I just get like, why are you asking me this? You've asked me this like 10 times already, and I've already given you the answer. Stop it. So yeah, it is a gift.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Eat, Pray, Run podcast with us today. I'm wondering, how can our listeners connect with and support you in this season?
Yes. So you can send me goldfish. I'm just kidding. Actually, if you want to send me goldfish, you can, because I love goldfish. But you can find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. My handle's David Connis. I hang out there out of all the social medias. And then I have a newsletter called The Marvelous Man that is on Substack. So you can find me there. There's links to that on my Instagram. And then I have a website, daveconnis.com. All of my books, in theory, should be in places where books are sold. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at Barnes & Noble. You can hopefully get them at your local bookstore. And yeah,
if not, you can
hang
request
out.
them.
Yeah, and maybe at the library. If none of those places have them, go ask for them, and that would be wonderful. Thanks.
Yes. Well, we will definitely put links in our show notes so people can find you. Thanks so much for just spending some time with us today. And I hope that other people will go hang out with Kiki, and looking forward to some of your books to come.
Yes, thank you.
Before we close, I just wanted to share a few more details with you about our Global Glory Chasers membership. Global Glory Chasers is for the family that loves to discover and explore together. And we have done the work for you, curating all the resources you need so you can travel to a new country each month from the comfort of your home. So you can make it a Saturday night tradition, or something that you pull out on the weekday with no plans, or maybe over Christmas break. You can explore some new foods and settle in for a movie or a book that might instigate some good family discussion. But we want you to make this experience your own, friends. This is also a great resource for homeschooling families who want to add some extra spice to their history, reading, or language arts curriculum. Head over to our website, www.dorinagilmore.com/GGC for Global Glory Chasers. And you can explore all the details there of the membership. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for my weekly Glorygram, which is a free letter that I send out to insiders. It's a way of staying more personally in touch with you and sharing more of the glory. Thanks for joining us, friends, for the Eat, Pray, Run podcast. We will be back here next Wednesday to drop our next episode. Let's chase his glory together.